Hey, welcome to the Flavor Lab. So today I want to make a steak marshmallow. I don't know what else to really say other than I'm gonna take a steak, I'm gonna turn it into powder, and then I'm going to make a marshmallow out of it. So yeah, I don't know, this is kind of questionable, but let's just jump into it. I will do a taste test at the end, just so that you can see if this tastes good or not. All right, let's get into it. All right, let's go ahead and get started on our steak marshmallow. So obviously the first thing we're gonna need is a piece of steak. So I have a pretty nice cut of steak that I'm using right here, and the first thing I wanna do is actually season this with a generous amount of salt. Now I know this might look like a large amount of salt, but this is quite a hunkin' piece of meat. And additionally, when grilling in the pan, a lot of the salt is gonna come off, so you might use a little more salt than you would expect. So to actually cook this, I'm gonna be using a cast iron pan. I'm just gonna stick that on a burner and let this come up to heat for about 5 minutes. And during that time, the salt is gonna kind of work its magic on the steak, and also it's gonna become a nice heat reservoir for our steak when we actually place it in, so it doesn't lose all of its heat as soon as the steak goes into the pan. So now once you do think that the cast iron pan is heated up well enough, go ahead and toss in your steak, and we're gonna let that cook on one side for at least a minute. You can take a peek and see if it's getting brown enough on one side, and if it's not, just let it cook for a little bit longer. And the thing is, what we're gonna do is we're gonna keep flipping this over and over. Now, for a thinner piece of steak, you might not need to do this, but since we have such a huge, thick piece of steak, you really do wanna make sure that you just keep flipping it over and over, and that's gonna allow both sides to kind of evenly heat up. Now, normally I like my steak kind of rare to medium rare, but because I'm using this in the freeze dryer, I really do want to make sure this is kind of cooked more all the way through. Just because a freeze dryer doesn't really cook the meat, so we really just want to make sure that it's, a little bit on the safer side. Once it's done cooking, just place it on a plate, and we're gonna let that rest for about 5 minutes or so. After that 5 minutes, we can just go ahead and put our steak on a cutting board, and what we want to do is cut this into somewhat thin strips. And this is gonna make it easier for the freeze dryer that I'm gonna stick it into to kind of be able to thoroughly dry this out. So I'm just gonna go ahead and layer all of the steak pieces on a tray for the freeze dryer, and we're ready to stick this into the freeze dryer. And that's simply just a matter of placing it in and then closing the door, and then just literally hitting the start button, and it's gonna start cooling and freeze drying. Now, about a day later, I went ahead and removed the steak from the freeze dryer, and the pieces of steak themselves were nice and freeze dried. All I'm gonna do now is just put this into a food processor and then blend this up into a powder. And essentially what I'm doing here is making just a steak powder, which is not something that I've normally seen. I did try this and it tastes a little bit weird. It's almost like beef jerky, but a little bit weird. Anyways, I just pour this into a bowl in the least efficient way possible, and now we can actually start making the marshmallows. So the first thing that we need to do is actually find a tray that we're gonna pour the marshmallows into. And whatever you choose to use to make the marshmallows, you really wanna make sure that's liberally greased. So I'm just using way more kind of cooking spray in every crevice to just make sure that that sticky marshmallow doesn't stick to the pan. Okay, so what we're gonna use to make the marshmallows is this stand mixer. And we're gonna have this on standby as we actually cook a sugar syrup. But before we do that, we need to put in some gelatin and some water, and we're just gonna basically let those two kind of bloom in the bottom of the stand mixer while we work on our sugar syrup that's gonna go in here. It doesn't hurt to turn this on for a little bit and kind of let the gelatin and water mix a little bit. And basically what's gonna happen is that the gelatin's gonna hydrate while we're making our sugar syrup. So speaking of the sugar syrup, let's go ahead and get started with that. So we're gonna need half a cup of water, we're gonna need 1.5 cups of granulated sugar, and then we're gonna need 1 cup of light corn syrup. And essentially, we're just gonna heat this up and just let it go. You don't have to mix it, you can just basically let the boiling mix it itself. And what's gonna happen is basically as this cooks, it's gonna start turning into a syrup, and we're gonna keep heating this until it reaches 240 degrees Fahrenheit or 115 degrees Celsius. Once it reaches that stage, basically the amount of water that's left in this is gonna be the softball stage of candy making. And what you should do is just go ahead and turn on the stand mixer and just have this on stir. And then what you can do is slowly pour in the sugar syrup. And also in my case, I'm gonna be pouring in the steak powder. Now, if you're making regular marshmallows, you wouldn't put in steak powder, but you could just put in just vanilla at this stage. And all we need to do is just make sure that everything that's in this bowl gets mixed together. And I'm just gonna go around with a nice little, spatula and just kind of push everything down. Now at this stage, go ahead and just turn on the mixer and put it at full blast. Now actually, I've tried to make marshmallows before in the past. I've actually tried to make a video doing this, and I got discouraged at this step because I thought it's not really whipping up like it should. But you just wanna let this sit and let it run. It's gonna take about 10 minutes, honestly, for enough air to get mixed into this for it to actually fluff up and turn into marshmallow. I've never really seen that before, so I didn't really know you were supposed to really mix it for that long. So honestly, I'm just letting it go for 10 minutes and I'm not really messing with it. I'm just, letting it go. And I have to say, it's kind of looking like gravy right now. And it doesn't smell great either. It really smells like my cat's food. But after about 10 minutes, it kind of fluffed up and it started to look like this.
Ow.
And I realized it doesn't look very good. So to kind of warn people and give it some more online appeal, I decided to add a little bit of food coloring, and I just followed the box instructions to be able to make a light brown, which was just a mix of red, yellow, and I believe a little bit of blue or green. I can't remember which one it was. And then we're just gonna let that mix and just keep mixing. Once it reaches this stage, it's kind of more or less done. So all we need to do now is just kind of scoop this into our mold and just kind of make sure that we have a nice flat layer and try not to spill it all over the side like I've done here. If you have, just clean it up and it should be okay. And then all we need to do is cover this and let it sit out on the countertop for anywhere from 4 hours or longer. And basically at this point, it should be ready to slice. The gelatin will be nice and firm and we're ready to actually slice this. So to do this, I decided to just put a little bit of powdered sugar on the top just to make sure that, just to kind of reduce the stickiness when I put this down over the cutting board. And then I'm just gonna flip this over onto the cutting board, and then I'm going to take a knife and I'm going to put some cooking spray on this and really thoroughly and liberally grease this so that it doesn't stick as you cut it. And this seems like it's a lot worse than it actually is. It wasn't as sticky as I was expecting, so it was pretty cool. Just go ahead and cut it into slices, and then we're ready to actually to have our taste test. So let's go ahead and do that. All right, so moment of truth. It's time to actually eat these marshmallows. Now I have to say that while I was cooking this, it didn't smell great. It smelled like my cat Liam's mouth right after he was done eating his dinner. Let's see how it turned out though. All right, so, the texture came out right. And honestly, if it wasn't for the fact that it was meat, it might be pretty good. So if you guys have any other marshmallowy ideas of me to make a marshmallow, maybe I should do that. Anyways, enough delaying the inevitable. It's time to take a bite. That's absolutely vile. Oh, I'm sorry, 1 second. I need a beer. Oh, that might be the most disgusting thing that I've ever had. It starts off fine. It tastes exactly like a regular marshmallow, and then it hits you and it doesn't taste very good. And it really does just taste like cat food or something. Oh. And I didn't filter it, so there's pieces of steak in my mouth right now. Honestly, if I was gonna give this a rating, -100 out of 10. All right, yeah, that's it for this week. Don't make this. All right, bye.
What do we do about it?